everyone, and welcome to the 14th episode of the Cantina Chatter Podcast. Today, I am joined by my friend Matt Brando to discuss Jaws. But we're not only going to be discussing the very first Jaws film, which is one of my personal favorites, and I know it's one of Matt's personal favorites. We're also going to be exploring Jaws 2, Jaws 3, and Jaws the Revenge, which is kind of also known as Jaws 4 in a way. So let's get right down to it. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today.
It is awesome to be a part of the podcast once again. Last time was so awesome, man. I gotta say, I don't know if it was included at the end. I forget because I rewatched it a couple of days ago. It was so awesome talking, collecting stuff with you and Nick. I really needed that to raise up my spirits. It helped so much. So I'm looking forward to this one again.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, that we hadn't really done that in a while. And especially for a big launch like that, Force Friday, where there's sensory overload with all these different new products and stuff that we only find out about, very close to the release. A lot of them we didn't know about until the release day. I think it is really, really nice, and it feels great to talk about it, express those frustrations and, talk about the things that went well, things like that. But like last time, I don't have any outline. I don't really have any preparation other than some notes that I jotted down about my observations rewatching these films, because that's what we did. I recently rewatched them. You recently rewatched them. And so it'll be interesting to compare notes and see what you noticed, see what I noticed. And get down and dirty with Jaws, basically, because Jaws is just so freaking amazing. It's absolutely one of my favorite movies ever. I can watch it anytime. I can quote any line from this movie. It's amazing. And I think part of that, and I think I mentioned this before because me and you talked about Funko's Jaws reaction toy line about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and things we wanted to see from it. And unfortunately, Funko doesn't do reaction anymore. So those are never going to happen, at least not from them. But one thing that I did mention at the time was that Jaws is my mother's favorite movie. So she's the one that kind of really got us into watching Jaws and all the Jaws films. But it's kind of one of those films, I think, in my opinion, that's a little bit overlooked. When you talk about, films, everybody knows what Jaws is. I'm sure everybody's seen it. If they haven't seen it, they definitely know what it's about. And but it is one of those movies that it doesn't have the big fandom like Star Wars or Harry Potter, Jurassic Park, things like that. It's a little bit more. It's a little bit more intimate of a fandom, and it's not like we're still getting movies from the series. So the last one was 20 years ago, wasn't it? 1987?
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason I really wanted to rewatch these films and talk about Jaws. So what do you think about all that?
Actually, the very first thing you're saying about the Funko figures, I think the reaction stuff's still going, but it's like Super 7. I don't know if they rebranded it as Super 7 or Super 7's a different company, but I think they can probably still put out stuff because they're coming out with Stranger Things. They've had Suicide Squad, and they started adding more articulation for the knees and stuff. I really would like them to even just reissue the first series and the Shark because I don't have them on card, and that'd be really cool to have a separate little collection on card because those figures are really cool.
Yeah, they are. Those aren't reaction though; those are just Funko figures, basically.
Oh, I thought Funko was with reaction. Okay.
Yeah, they were, but now it's just straight up Funko, and they're doing the 3 3/4 inch. They're still doing them for a bunch of films, but now they're higher quality, more articulation. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that stinks. Maybe they'll license Super 7 or somebody can get the license and then they can redo them or something. But those figures kicked a lot of butt. But for me as a kid, it was on rotation for VHS tapes. It was Jurassic Park, it was Jaws, and then it was Return of the Jedi. So it was Jurassic Park, Jaws, Star Wars. And I'm really thankful that those three franchises, you can watch those movies over and over again, and they're not crappy, because sometimes you see films as a kid, for example, for me, Little Rascals movie, I think from 96 or something. I loved that as a kid, but I tried to watch that as an adult, in college or right after college, a couple years ago, and I could not finish it. It was so bad. So I'm very thankful that at least the first Jaws film is still out, awesome and amazing. But the sequels as an adult, sequels as a kid, I'll just go off prematurely and say this. The sequels as a kid were awesome. As an adult, not so much. But the first Jaws is, just like you said, ridiculously quotable, immensely underrated because it's pretty much a masterpiece of cinema. There's so many quotable lines. Like I wrote that in my notes. Where did I put it? But it was the Paul. I'll let Paul do the printing line because Brody's like, let Paula do the printing. And then Hendrix like, what's wrong with my printing? Let Paula do the printing. It's just that extra little emphasis is just that little like extra touch that makes it so excellent.
Exactly. And you know what? I know we're not going to Jaws 2 quite yet, but this kind of ties into what you're saying because the other day you showed me, I think it was a Jiffy or something of the mayor, or no, it was a video. You were watching it, right? And you recorded it like with your phone, I guess.
Yeah.
It was the mayor saying like, wave to my son. And it's just like little things like that really add a lot of, personality and a little bit more of a personable touch to the films. And it's really fun to see stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I wrote my notes for at least the first film and included some in the second film, but it wasn't so much fleshing out of the characters in the second film. But in the first film, there is so much charisma from the top 3 stars to the middle to the bottom. Middle, like say Ellen, Mayor Vaughn, Hendrix, to the bottom with Mrs. Taft, Mrs. Kittner. Like Mrs. Kittner like murders that scene where she's slaps Brody. Even the what guy, everybody, or Ben Gardner, like, oh there, little fellow. It's like every single person, and I pretty much have to contribute this to Spielberg. Every single person from top to bottom was incredible. Even the guy, hey fellas, the guy who gets eaten in the pond. Like every single person is so memorable and quotable, and I have to give that to like the greatest director of all time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's just one of those things that, and you notice these kind of touches in all of his movies. I mean, you see it in the Indiana Jones series, you see it in Close Encounters, E.T., Jurassic Park. Just those little. I was trying to think of a word for it. Spielbergian, like touches.
That's a word. That's an adjective. We know.
Cool. Yeah, like just those little touches that he injects into each of his films. I mean, you can definitely, feel that, and I think it really comes across, as us, in the audience watching these films, and it just makes them a lot more enjoyable.
I want to say, since we're on the topic of Spielberg, that growing up watching this film on VHS, you have the pan and scan, which is, they crop the 235 anamorphic cinematic widescreen down to like a third of the frame, and then they'll move it around so you can see the whole frame. And it's so different as an adult or like a late teenager when you got the DVD. Actually, I think our DVDs we still bought for some reason. My dad wanted to get the full screen. Oh, if it's the full TV. Rather than the widescreen DVDs. And it took me to like becoming like really into film at age like 17-ish to really start like appreciating widescreen. And so like when the Blu-ray came out, it was almost like a whole new experience, seeing like the full frame and how everything was framed, actors blocked and all this stuff. And it was so like gorgeous, and you can really appreciate the beauty and what Spielberg was going for. And like every single shot, like there's a Twitter called One Perfect Shot or something. You can literally have one perfect shot for every shot in Jaws because every shot is stylistic and cinematic. Like I watched the disclaimer. We didn't say this yet, but you're like, hey, let's do a podcast about Jaws. Like, okay. And then for some reason, I watched Jaws backwards. I watched Jaws 4, 3, 2, and then the first one. And I really noticed it stuck out that Spielberg, the way he moves the camera and the way he framed everything, no other sequel touches how well done it's directed and it's framed for the viewer's eye. It's something that's really appreciated when you watch it backwards.
It's funny when I know this is kind of going off a little bit on into a tangent, but I've kind of been noticing those influences that he's had like on other directors. Like I was recently watching A Monster Calls. And like you see like Bayona's like the way the same thing that you're saying, like the way that he sets up the shots and like the way that there's just these little touches and they feel very Spielbergian. Is that the word we're using for it?
Yeah.
I mean, that it's really interesting to see like everything that you're saying, but how it like it's rubbing off on other people, and I think that's pretty awesome.
Oh, absolutely. There's I'm pretty sure it was Spielberg's choice. Like when Chrissy's killed, and there's a shot. This happens twice in the film. There's a shot of the sea at night, and then it like cross dissolves into day, and then Brody's head. This is the first time you see Brody. Like the back of Brody's head comes into frame. I was like, wow, that was brilliant. That has to be Spielberg. And it happens again, I think, when the guys are on the boat, and then it's nighttime. And then, I think it's the boat's on the left side of the frame, and it's nighttime. And then it cross dissolves into daytime. And I'm sure Spielberg wanted to match it up directly there, but the boat's a little bit off, but it dissolves pretty much the same shot into daytime. So it's just like, wow, you really don't see stuff like this, even in today's film, where you think people would be more evolved with their skills in their craft. But it just shows like how underrated and great this film really is.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I'll have to go back and look at that second one. I kind of feel like right before that scene happens, isn't it where the Brody boys are like playing in the boat and Ellen's like, get out of the boat. And it's kind of like the same thing. I kind of remember like the sky being the similar color to right before like it cuts to those guys like trying to catch the shark.
It might be. I'll have to watch that then. But the only one I really noticed the cross dissolve for the night was the very first ending of the scene, and then the guys at night with the boat, and then it's like a wide, and then it cross dissolves into a wide of the day. So that's the only two ones. And now I have to watch it again. But it's just little things like this that truly make it a masterpiece.
Yeah, truly. And like you said, the actors, I mean, that's like a major part of it. I mean, you have,
Oh yeah.
like you said, like, I mean, I think you outlaid it perfectly. From top to bottom, like the whole cast, they're all very warm feeling, very, they come across on screen as just being very relatable. I mean, you don't have like these really like flashy, like, I mean, there's nobody in the film that you really look at and they look unattainable. Like this day and age, you see a lot of films and, it's like, like A-list celebrities, they look perfect.
Oh
yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't really get that with Jaws. I mean, they're people they're just like everyday people.
Absolutely.
And I think that's part of what makes Amity Island and Jaws feel like a real place, is that it feels like a place that could really exist. And that goes into the setting. It's just a really nice way that they did that by, setting this on Amity Island and, filling it with a population that feels realistic. And it's just, it's funny to talk about this stuff because you don't really think about it when you're watching the film, but when you step back and look at it from the outside, it is really interesting to notice all that.
No, I agree 100% because, like, do you remember when Quint is scratching his nails and then, like, Mrs. Taft, like, turns around and puts, like, her finger in her ear and there's this one quick shot of this, like, kind of, like, pudgier old lady, like a grandma type deal. And she's like, huh? She's very memorable.
Yeah.
If this film was made nowadays, that would have been, like, some, like, super gorgeous, like, 35-year-old mom or something. Like, but, like, now that you say that, like, yeah, look at the mayor. Like, the mayor's not like this, tanned, like, Len Peterson looking dude. Like, he, Mayor Vaughn is, he looks like a real life politician. And that's a great thing, too, about the writing. I'll just get into that, about the mayor. The mayor, you can probably say he's like a cliched evil mayor, but this is before I'd say like, the tropes started existing. And what's great is you can kind of feel for him because like, hey, dude, like this is his job. Like he wants to stay as mayor. If he shuts down the beaches, like the greatest line, once again, quotable lines. What is it? 24 hours is like 3 weeks. Like you have like that mentality for Amity, and if Amity doesn't have, and this is a great thing I noticed, I really, trying to dive into an analysis that I'll probably do later, hopefully, in my life. The sign, the very first sign before it's vandalized or whatever, with the shark fin, it shows that Amity is having this July 4th or that weekend the 50th annual regatta, meaning it's one of the most important summers they're going to have. It's an anniversary year. So it raises the stakes up even more for this mayor to be like, all right, we need to have a great year this year so I can get reelected in the future. And so, yeah, he'll have you. So you see his motivations and where he's coming from when he pressures Brody on the boat, the going over, that really great one take. When they say it's a boating accident rather than a shark attack, because he's got his signs, he's all ready to go and stuff. So, like, even like the minor character of the mayor in that subplot is fleshed out enough to where you really understand who he is and where he's coming from. So excellent stuff.
Sure. Even the medical examiner, like, I mean, he didn't need to be anything special for the story, but I mean, he still comes across as a believable guy who's charismatic. And I think I even heard somewhere that he was actually like a real doctor or something that lived in that area when they were filming.
Oh wow, I wouldn't doubt that. Like tons of films have done that stuff. They just bring up like it's called Italian neorealism, and what it is instead of like hiring actors to, especially if it's like something low like that, instead of hiring actors to come in and pay them a shit ton of money, you just, hey, do you want to like say a couple lines, doctor? I mean, it's just real easy. It's not that hard. Okay, and then they do it. There's arguments against that, but I would say it worked. I didn't know he was a real life doctor or whatever he was. So worked out for me. It was believable for me. That's all it counts. Is it believable or not to the audience? So fooled me if he really was.
Sure. Yeah, totally. That's a very interesting term. Italian neorealism, is that what you called it?
Yeah, I learned that at film school back at BG. It was like the 20s, I think, in Italy, and so like they decided to like instead of hire actors, they just like if somebody was a butcher, they would just hire a butcher to be the actor, and because you wouldn't have to teach the actor, to just be like that. I mean, yeah, he might not act that well, but at least he could cut the meat well enough. So.
Sure. Well, that's why it's good to have you on here, because of course you're the film guy and you know all about this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, thank you.
So another thing that I think makes the first Jaws like awesome is the pace. Like it's never lagging, it's never like too fast. I mean, it's got like a perfect pace. There's moments that come up where, you feel a little bit like amped up and, oh, where's the shark? There's a shark. But then, it kind of settles back, but it never really like feels slow. Like the whole movie, it's a long film, but it doesn't feel it because it's paced so well.
Yes, I agree. I have that in my notes several times. This film is very quick plotting. It never lets you go. That's something that I guess the sequels don't do that great of a job of, because I watched these backwards and I just noticed how fast and gripping Jaws was. Like the opening scene, I can try to go and remember all these notes as possible. The opening scene, within a couple minutes you have an attack, and then like 10 minutes later you have the Kittner boy being killed, and it's realistically and artistically done. And then let me see here. I have just like there's a scene after scene that's just like really great. Like you have the holiday roast is another attack, even though you don't see the shark, which is well done. If you want action in this movie, it's like every like 5 to 10 minutes you got a consistent shark sightings or non-sightings. It's just really great, tight written screenplay. Like the scene after scene thing when I was talking about. Let me see if I can find it in my notes here. So an example would be, you got Hooper saying, "Well, it wasn't Jack the Ripper; it was a shark," and it's pretty much saying like, "Okay, there's a shark out there. We need to catch it." What happens in the next scene? Bam! Straight cut right next to a tiger shark's mouth, and then we dolly out, and they're measuring it. So I was like, "Oh wow, they caught the shark." Tight script. Right after we're told a shark's out there, we catch the shark. So there's tons of instances like that. I won't continue dribbling on.
Yeah, no, that's a good example, though. I mean, that's totally what it is. It's just it never lags. It's never like overloaded either. I mean, it's just a consistent pace where there's always something happening, and your interest is maintained the entire time. I mean, I think the longest scenes, like thinking back on the movie, I think when Brody and Hooper they're having wine at Brody's house, and that's a little bit of a long scene. Then of course on the boat there's a couple of them later in the film, but I mean I think those are kind of the longest ones, and not even those are like terribly long scenes. So I mean it's just so incredibly paced. I love it.
Right, and the great thing about that scene is Mrs. Kittner, the scene before that, this is okay. I can probably remember what happened. These 4 scenes here. So Mrs. Kittner slaps the crap out of Brody, and Brody is defeated. So he goes home. So what happens at home? He's drinking with Hooper, and his son Sean lifts his spirits, which is something he needed. It's this great little emotional roller coaster ride. After that, Hooper comes, and then they're like, "All right, you want to cut open the shark?" So the next scene, they cut open the shark. They see that the tiger, there's no Kittner boy in the shark. So what happens in the next scene? They go out at night, drunk, looking for the shark, and they end up finding Ben Gardner in his boat and seeing is pretty much another attack scene. But we know we arrived late. There are 4 scenes right there, right in a row, in a sequence that are so well done that aren't done in any other shark movie. Really, it's just there's a lot of care into going into making this film compared to any other sequel or shark movie or ripoff of Jaws than any other ripoff of Jaws because of the tight written script. It's incredible. It really is. If you really analyze it, why is Jaws so great? You can see why.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's why it's, such a rewatchable movie. It's such a movie that you can, quote. I could play the whole movie in my head. Like if I didn't have access to watching it, I'm sure I could just like close my eyes and just think the whole thing through. It's just so memorable. Like all the little details that you've mentioned, the actors, setting, pace. I think those all contribute to the overall feeling you get while watching it. And even after watching it, it's kind of like you just sit there and you're like, oh, dang, that's such an awesome movie.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Sometimes with sequels, you want to watch a movie, like say like John Wick. Like John Wick for me was so awesome. Like, damn, I want to see a sequel for that. And then you see John Wick 2 and you're like, that was good, I guess, but it wasn't as good as John Wick. So like I want to rewatch the first John Wick. And so with Jaws, like, damn, that was so good. I want to see more. I want to see a Jaws 2. I want to see a Jaws 3. I want to see a Jaws 4. But they're not that good. So after watching Jaws and seeing how excellent it is, you should probably just rewatch the original instead of seeing the sequels.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that's a good segue into Jaws too. Because this is, out of the 3 sequels, this is the one that actually feels, I guess, the most like a Jaws sequel, even though, you could totally just watch Jaws and pretend Jaws 2 never happened. At least Jaws 2, it's got the same setting. It's got, several of the same actors, same Amity Island. But there's still a lot of things about it that are very, very different from the original film. So yeah, Jaws 2, what is your overall take on it compared to the first Jaws as a direct sequel to the film?
I think that's a good question because you can look at it as how good is it compared to Jaws, or how good is it compared to other films that say that they're the best film since Jaws, which is like, I guess, a knock on Jaws 2 because I feel like Jaws 2 is the best film, a shark film since Jaws. I think it's good. I think I've discussed this previously in my friend Chris's review of Jaws 2. I actually have the novelization, which I think is based off of like one of the first drafts, if not the first draft of Jaws 2, which it's really aggressive and dark. So the shark attack totally messed up Amity, and almost all the people and businesses have been like deserted. So it's almost like a deserted town. And what happens is I think a casino or something's being built, like Amity's being rebuilt by the mafia. So like the mayor and stuff are in debt to the mafia. So that's why like Len Peterson and stuff came in, and he was like going to be part of one of the business deals for the mafia. He was like kind of like a liaison to the whole thing. And it was very dark. And the ending of the book, I guess spoilers, or the script, there's one shark, and at the end of it, it gets killed, but it was a mama and then a bunch of babies dispersed at the end. But the whole thing it's kind of oddly paced because it's mostly like this like drama, and they put a lot more emphasis on the I forget his name. I have it written here in my notes, but the scuba instructor. He had a lot more depth in the novelization and the original screenplay, and he had like only one scene where you barely get to see him when the shark scares one of the divers. It was a very dark. I recommend it if you're a Jaws fan to read it if you haven't read it already. It was very dark, but the great thing about it was it took risks. But the greatest Jaws 2 story was somewhere between what we got in the final product of Jaws 2 and the original Mafia draft. It was written by Howard Sackler, I think it's Sackler, who wrote, I think, it was a Gottlieb who wrote the first one. But I think Sackler's a part of the first Jaws. Sackler wrote a script that was somewhere between the first one and the second one. I don't remember them having the mafia. It's been like a year since I read it, but it was a little bit less conservative. But they fleshed out like way more of the characters. And obviously we know in Jaws 2, I think my biggest problem is that there's just a bunch of kids, and it's kind of like a slasher film, and the shark just attacks them. You see a lot more of the shark, and there's no like playing up of Brody going insane. Like, is there a shark or is there not a shark? I felt like they missed the boat there, because they show the shark in the very opening scene with the divers and the orca, like, taking the photos. I felt like they should have shot that in a way where they didn't show them, so you don't know what attacked them. And like the whole time, like even the chick with the boat who gets blown up, or she blows herself up, I should say, because she pours gasoline on herself. There's a couple like there's a couple stupid things in the film that really make it go from like great to like good for me. But the whole gist of Jaws 2 is just like Jaws 3 and Jaws 4. Universal was too scared to take risks, and when they did take risks for Jaws Revenge, they were not good choices. So they went too safe with Jaws 2 and Jaws 3, but for Jaws 2, they really could have played up the insanity, the whole plot of is there not a shark, and then Brody gets fired. Instead, they went like super safe, and they shot it and made it in a way where you and the audience are in on it the whole time, rather than experiencing it with Brody and not seeing the shark at all. Even though there was one cool shot, I'll end this with the shot of the shark, and then the fin comes up, and then it kind of like dollies around. You see the shark fin with the town. That's a cool shot. But if I would have made the movie, it's all Brody's perspective. You don't see any of the shark at all until maybe when that shark comes up and attacks the diver. That would have scared the pants off of everybody in the theater. I think that would have been the moment you reveal the shark. That's the thing. That's why Jaws was so good. It's because you don't see the shark at all, even though you know it's there. But for Jaws 2, I think you either have more sharks or you have less of the shark, and you don't know if there is one or not. And I think that's what they're trying to go for, and I think they missed the ship. So.
Yeah, I mean, I love that suggestion, because that's not something I had ever really considered. Like, if they had based the first half of Jaws 2 around Brody's PTSD from everything he went through in the first film, and just kind of, made you as an audience member wonder, is the guy losing it? I mean, is there really even a shark? Is he just kind of trying to get over having experienced all the trauma he went through? And then, later they show the shark. I mean, that could have been a potentially amazing way to have approached Jaws 2. So, yeah, I mean, I love that. That's an awesome suggestion.
Yeah, what you said earlier was like all the people who returned. That's what also makes it so great. I get to see, like, it's not like a Mayor Vaughn that's a new actor. I forget the actor's name. It's not like, we have Chief Brody and someone else was recast. Like, we get to see Roy Scheider again. Like, that's really cool. We get to see Ellen Brody again, Lauren Gary. We see all these, but, we have new kids. And, God, the kid, Mike Brody was, and he when I did my review with Chris like a year ago, that kid who played Mike Brody never acted again. So yeah, it kind of stinks. But the kids are really weak. But like you said at the beginning, that's what makes this film pretty watchable, because you have all these returning. Even I think was Mrs. Taft returned. I know Mrs. Taft was in Jaws 4. Okay, yeah. Mrs. Taft was in Jaws 4 as a little cameo. That was funny. But you have all these people returning, and then so we have a really great like opportunity, like a Force Awakens. Like Force Awakens, you have like all the old people you like. You got Chewie, you got Han, and barely any Luke. But you have the opportunity for these old characters to pass on to the new characters, and they could have done it, but they kind of just like missed the boat on that one too.
Yeah. No, it is really cool to have those actors back for sure. Like, I mean, they could have gone like a total 180, set the movie in Australia or something. Oh, here's Jaws 2. It's a totally different cast and all this. But I love that they did follow the original setting, Amity Island. And even though, like you're saying, there's a lot of those details from like the original like story where, it was being, the town was devastated, which I'm sure to an extent it actually was. But that's never really explored in the film. I mean, they kind of just give you the hint like it's just carrying on business as usual. At least that's the impression I get when I watch Jaws 2. It doesn't really feel like it's devastated, as far as the local economy goes. But having the mayor there, having Brody, having Ellen, and then, some of the other more minor actors in there, I think really helps to tie it back to the first film. It helps to anchor it, to make it feel more like a direct sequel to Jaws, even if it's not the same quality of a film. It is quite nice that it's there.
Yeah, something that's really great for Roy Scheider's character Brody. In the first film, like his whole plot was he's afraid of the water, and then he has to go out to fight the shark. And there's a really great, so he has to arc. And there's a really great line he says to Ellen in the hospital after Mike is in shock, and he's like, why don't you take, I think it's Sean or Mike. He's like, why don't you take him home? And then Ellen's like, to New York? He goes like, no, to like, our house on the island. And I was like, so that the subtext is, this is his town, MFer. You're not going to mess with his town and his people. And he's here to stay. He's not going to leave because he's afraid of you and afraid of the water. So like, Amity is his town and you're not going to mess with it. And so he'll do anything it takes. And so that's what makes this film great is Roy Scheider. He gives, and here's some background information. He did not get, to my knowledge, from articles on the internet, he did not get along at all with the director. And you can't tell that at all with the film because this film lives and dies on him and his performance. And he gives 110%. If he mails it in, he's like, I don't care about this director. It's just a paycheck movie for him. Because I think he had like a contract with Universal where he had to do like 3 movies or something. And then they're like, hey, if you do Jaws 2, we'll like knock off a movie or you'll be done. And he's like, all right, F it. I'll do it. So you really can't tell that Scheider like has any problems with Universal or problems with the director because he did such a great job. And he's like one of the greatest heroes in my opinion. It's not just from the first film, but also from this film. It just totally nails it and signifies it for me. But last bit that you said about Amity, and if they went to Australia or something, Amity, I guess, what was it? Martha's Vineyard is the title of the town. Martha's Vineyard, I think Universal did want to go a route where like, hey, we want the town to be deserted. And so what that means is they have to fake boarding up for the sake of production value and all that stuff. Sets. You have to board up some of the businesses, make it look like the town's deserted. And I guess Martha's Vineyard was like, oh no, we're not gonna do that. Like they were too like prideful of themselves. Like dudes at the time in Martha's Vineyard, the only reason why people visit your town now is for Jaws. Like Jaws puts you on the map. Like you're not going to show any respect to that film that helped you out, and your town looked great in the film and looks great. I'd like to visit it one day.
Oh yeah.
But that was so wrong of them because the Jaws 2 could have been so much better if it went the deserted route, and that's I think the whole reason of that first opening scene for Jaws 2. What we got in the film, it was kind of useless. It was just like this scholarship fund. Like there's no real context to the scene besides just getting a couple people together and dancing, and you can probably meet some of the teenagers and they're just typical. I want to date that chick. There's a lot better subtext because in the original story or stories, like the whole bit was this is the bounce back for Amity because we're deserted and now here is the mafia essentially on the low. Bringing back, I think it was like condominiums or something they're opening, and that's what that scene originally is supposed to be, instead of like this stupid useless scholarship fund scene. So, not as great of a script and tightly written as the original Jaws, unfortunately.
Yeah, that it is an interesting thing. Like it is a little bit jarring too, like just seeing that high school scene because it's unlike anything we ever saw in the first film, and yeah, you do have all these random kids at the beginning. You're like, oh, where are all these kids coming from? And I mean, then you kind of figure it out who it's revolving around. Like the Brody kids and stuff. But it's just really interesting, like that they chose that dynamic because it is quite different, quite a contrast. And That's kind of the whole way like the film opens up, right? Like after the shark attack under the water, like it's just kind of like Brody driving around in his Jeep or whatever, and he's just kind of like, come on, come on. He's stuck in traffic, and then and then he ends up at the school, and yeah, it's just kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like for the opening of the original film, you got, like I talked about with the billboard, you get that billboard shot with the subtext of this being a really important summer, being the 50th annual get together. And then here is just a bunch of shots of him just driving. Like there's no significance besides just to put the opening credits text overlay. For the kids, we'll talk about the kids. Like I didn't really care about any of the kids at all. Like there's not, like Larry Vaughn's kid's kind of an a-hole, like because he says that one line about the one chick, the sparrow.
Oh yeah.
And apparently that was improv, and he felt really bad about it afterwards. But the only chick I ever cared about was like the kind of probably the best looking chick, Marge, who was a hero by pushing Sean up on the boat right before she gets eaten. It's like, damn, I guess that's the only like teenager I like. Besides that, they're all like just typical teenagers that they're like throwing water balloons, like, oh, I should date this chick. Like, I don't care about these people. I'd rather just, I guess, root on the shark to eat him. Like, who cares? Like, in the first film, you cared about everybody. Like, I mean, I even cared about the mayor because I understood where he's coming from. Here, it's just like, kill the kids. It's,
yeah. That,
like Tina and what was the boyfriend's name?
Gosh, what was it?
I forget it. But anyway, Tina and her boyfriend, it's just like, oh, they're making out and, you know, they're doing the dirty. It's like, why? Go shark. Because that's like the whole thing about the slasher films, like with Halloween, like kids have sex, and because they sinned and they had it out of wedlock, they'll be killed by Michael. So like here, kids are fooling around, they're going to get killed by the shark. So I guess go shark for morals. I don't know. There are a couple good things. I want to keep talking, but did you recognize any of the science that was included in Jaws 2?
The science. You mean like when the lady comes out and measures like the killer whale, things like that?
Yeah, a couple of things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Not as much as in the first film, but yeah, there were a few little bits of science here and there.
Yeah, there was a couple bits of science in the first film. In this film, they probably played it up a little bit more with the plotting. Yeah, you got the lady coming out and she's talking. There's some exposition there. But I think the biggest thing was the echolocation type deal where, the shark, during that autopsy or whatever scene with the orca, the lady's talking about, I guess, like, or maybe Brody remembers it for the first film. I don't remember. But obviously the echolocation thing, sharks, are trying to splashing and all that. So plays into the very end with, slapping the power line to get the shark's attention. So like there's some good bits in here. And apparently, I think I tweeted or retweeted it a couple months ago, or maybe a couple weeks ago, that, you probably think, oh, that shark can't catch up to that boat when the chick pours the gasoline over herself and the shark gets the chick on the skis, or she goes missing underwater. Apparently that's plausible because the sharks, I think the boat can go up to like 30 miles an hour, and like sharks can do like 30 miles an hour. So like the boat, that's actually pretty plausible. It's not like Jaws 3 where like the shark is, the fin's just like roaring out of the water, and the shark is literally like not on top of the skiers, but like in front of the skiers. Like, so there are some good things in here science-wise that are plausible that I appreciate, but unfortunately, the film could have been a lot better.
Yeah, I was just looking up Tina's boyfriend. His name was Eddie.
Yes, Eddie. Eddie.
Yeah, he's the guy that looks like exactly like Peter Brady from the Brady Bunch.
Dude, oh man, that's another thing I guess I don't miss when I watch that film is those haircuts or the hairstyles.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's one thing that my mother has always like remarked about Jaws 2 is that there's just no charisma with these kids. Like I mean,
Nope.
I mean, we talked about how like the people in the first Jaws, like there's not really anybody that's like outstanding looking, but I mean, these kids, it kind of feels like they almost went out of their way in some cases to make them look like really like you look at them, you're like, couldn't they have gotten anybody that looked a little more presentable? It's just a total opposite thing.
Yeah, maybe they went for like the the nerdier kids with the glasses, and like the one kid said, the one kid's like, "Hey man, she's looking at you." I hope to God if I ever do like a Jaws 2 analysis or something, I gotta include this. But then the kid's like, "Nah, man, she wasn't looking at me." I'm just like, oh my God, this is the most like cliched, like nerdy, like dude stuff, like no confidence or self-esteem. I'm just like, yeah. So you look at these kids, like the one that I think is Ginger, the one kid, I forget his name too. It was like Mike's friend, he's a little bit chubby, I suppose.
Oh yeah.
It's just like yeah. Nobody here is like, I don't know. That's what make the first Jaws film really great. But like, man, there's some ugly kids.
Yeah, I was trying to word that nicely, but since you're saying it, yeah, I'm going to say it too. Yeah, that's the thing. They're ugly.
Like I said, Marge, I mean, I guess, Mike Brody's all right looking, but Marge was the best looking one, and she gets eaten. But that's like the only ones I was like, oh, hello, Marge. But I don't know.
And then you do have, I forget at the very beginning, you have like Brody's like slightly mildly creeper moment when he's like whistling at Tina.
Does he?
Yeah, like he whistles at her, and then he's joking obviously, but
oh yeah, I remember that. Okay, yeah.
But it's just kind of like a little. Ugh.
Yeah, I probably I don't know. It goes down to maybe the director. I honestly don't know, but the first film, it you can't outdo it. And they try to do a really great sequel, and unfortunately, well, it's the best one, fortunately, but unfortunately not as good as the first.
Sure. One of the things that bothers me the most about Jaws 2 is like the continuity. I mean, we were talking about how there's not really a whole lot of visibility in terms of the economy having taken a hit, but like they really aged up the Brody kids from the first film, and I think Jaws 2 is like maybe like is it like 3 years after the first film or something?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I have no idea. It might have been.
Yeah, because the first one, I don't know about when it takes place, but as far as like in the real world, Jaws was it 1975, and then Jaws 2 was 78. So yeah, 3 years later. And they really aged up the kids, even though, I mean, it seems like it's supposed to take place fairly, recently after the first film.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kids, like, they lost their Boston accents. They're completely gone. And they're, like,
yes,
a lot older. It's just kind of a weird thing. Which, it's like, why did they have accents in the first place if the parents didn't,
Yeah, I think they were, maybe they were supposed to be, I thought they were New York accents because they were from New York. So, like, that's something I totally noted because, like, Mike's in the boat. All right, Dad, just another, I'm like, hey, that's this guy's New York
just
accent, and he totally loses
it. Please.
Yeah, just a little longer, Dad. And I'm just like, hey, this guy's little Boston or New York accent on, and then like he totally loses it in 2, 3, and 4. And here's the biggest thing. I'm gonna jump the gun. Mike Brody is the biggest problem with this franchise, besides Universal playing it safe and not really giving great stories. Mike Brody. A shark went right by him and almost ate him and killed him. And he was in shock because of this in the first film. So what happens in Jaws 2? Like nothing happened in Jaws 1. Like the shark never went by him. He goes out boating. He wants to go boating with his friends. Like, hey, buddy, sharks are still out there and they could kill you. Like, no, like he's not like petrified at all. Or there's no PTSD with him at all. Even though he was the guy clearly who could have been killed. Shark went right by him. But his dad is the one suffering PTSD because he's an actual human being. Like, Mike's, like, totally oblivious to, like, Mike, so he boats and stuff in the second film. Like, nothing happened in the first film. In Jaws 3, jumping the gun, he works at SeaWorld as an engineer somehow. And this is the greatest thing. He's an engineer in SeaWorld in Jaws 3. And then all of a sudden, he's a marine biologist in Jaws 4. But anyway, like, he went back to college, for, like, 8 years. Anyways, so Jaws 3, like he's not scared of the water at all. Sean's the only one scared of the water. And Jaws 4, all of a sudden he loves the water even more that he's a marine biologist. It's just like, how in the blue hell does somebody who almost gets killed by a shark in the first film go from almost getting killed by a shark in the first film to loving the water and sailing and almost getting killed But nothing happened again. Like he almost like he has that what's that 50 First Dates? Drew Barrymore had that like short-term memory loss or something. It's almost like he has short-term memory loss. Like he never like remembers sharks or anything. Even though he in Jaws 3, I think there's a line where like the one summer and then like totally like forgot about Jaws 2. So like he just doesn't remember that he was almost killed by a shark in the first film, and then every sequel just like regresses to where he's a marine biologist and is studying sharks. It makes no sense. There's no logical point in his character writing. It's just like, holy God.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. It just gets worse and worse for Mike Brody. I mean, he gets even more and more involved in being in the ocean. It makes zero sense at all. I want to move on to Jaws 3, but before I do that, I one thing I didn't talk about when we were talking about the first Jaws is John Williams' soundtrack, because it's gold and it's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is one of the other saving graces for Jaws 2 is that John Williams did come back and do the score once again.
Yeah. Yeah, that score is really good. Obviously, it's good. It's not as great as the first one, which is, in my opinion, I love Jurassic Park, I love Star Wars. I honestly think Jaws is probably his best soundtrack or score. So Jaws 2 is still really great accompanying. Obviously, he has to do different stuff, but thankfully, it's better than Jaws 3. Jaws 3's soundtrack was terrible, in my opinion. And Jaws 4, might as well on the music. I actually really like Jaws 4's soundtrack. It was done by Michael Smalls or something. I forget his name. But there's some really nice like little like and then it's like a new take that really worked for me. If like there's one thing for Jaws Revenge, just really quickly, it's the music that's really great. So John Williams, obviously probably the greatest composer for films of all time. Thank God. So like you have John Williams returning for Jaws 2 and Schneider and Mayor Vaughn and Ellen and all that stuff. So that's also another reason why Jaws 2 is the best shark movie since Jaws. You got John Williams.
Totally. So, Jaws 3. Gosh.
Oh boy.
So, I know you might feel differently. I'm just going to say it right before we even get into the details. But for me, Jaws 3 is the absolute worst of all the Jaws films. I can barely sit through it. When I recently rewatched it, it was the first time I had probably sat down and watched the whole thing in like 20 years. No joke. It's incredibly hard for me to get through. I just think that it's a terrible movie. There's like no redeeming quality about it, except for one thing I think is kind of cool, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But what is your impression of Jaws 3 with regards to the overall franchise?
I'm like a hair away from agreeing with you because I rewatched it. If you watch, it's almost like you have to watch it in two different experiences. If you watch it as a Jaws film, oh my God, it's terrible. But if you watch it as like a non-Jaws film, like if you just enjoy it as like maybe like a campy shark movie and you don't care about the Brody name or like any of the characters, just want to see them slice and dice, kind of like a Piranha 3D type deal, then you might like it and enjoy it. But as an adult, I mean, as a kid, like I said previously at the beginning of the podcast, I loved all the Jaws sequels when I was a kid. I liked Jaws 3 because it had a great premise. SeaWorld, a shark in SeaWorld, how can you mess that up? And they did somehow. It's it's ridiculous. Like there's a moment, there's two moments I have written in my notes about the campiness and the ridiculousness of the film, besides the special effects, which we'll talk about. Like Mike, he's running to go somewhere to, I think, warn people or whatever, but he like takes the popcorn guy and throws him off his ATV or whatever, and then takes the ATV and runs off, and the shot stays with the popcorn guy as he goes, "Hey, Mike!" Like he knows who this guy is, the popcorn guy. And like all of a sudden a bunch of kids like come over and start like eating his and taking and stealing his popcorn. And then the second like most ridiculous thing is when that British guy, the assistant with the weird eyeball, the game hunter, he's getting people out of the water, and then I guess like he spills the fat guy's beer or something or food, and then before the fat guy can punch him, the guy's like he's waiting for the punch, the British guy, and then the British guy punches him. I'm just like, what the hell is going on with this film? The only saving grace is that it's a shark in SeaWorld, and then maybe you yourself can imagine a better movie. Because the original screenplay was a lot better. They actually gave character depth and PTSD to Michael Brody. But for some reason, like I said, Universal is safe, and for some reason they cut it. It would been really great if there's more depth to the film like that. But the only saving grace for this film compared to Jaws of Revenge is there's a lot of stupid shit in Jaws of Revenge. And I feel like if I could do my own fan cut, which we'll talk about later, I could probably place Jaws of Revenge over Jaws 3. But for now, for me, to answer your question, I have Jaws 3 slightly above Jaws of Revenge. So Jaws 3 is the third best or second worst sequel.
I like second worst better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you're saying, the premise about a shark being in SeaWorld, that's interesting. And I think they could have, done something pretty cool out of that. But for whatever reason, they just didn't. And the story of course, follows the Brodies, as do all the films. It's the two Brody brothers, primarily Mike, who, now he's played by Dennis Quaid, who looks nothing like, the Brody from the previous film. Not only that, but this is, I think, 1983 was Jaws 3. So that's like, what, 9, 10, like, just like 5 years later from Jaws 2, right? But this guy looks like he's in his 30s, so it
Oh man, oh yeah, and he's like the head engineer. Like, you had to go to college for that for sure. Like, how is that possible? I think he looked like probably a sophomore in Jaws 2, maybe. I don't know, maybe a junior. Yeah, it's just like, how the hell? Like, I'm not. See, a lot of people complain about like the ages and stuff. I don't really care so much. Like, a lot of people hate in Rocky 5 that his son like aged a lot overnight. I don't really care so much about that. Just give me a good story. So, but still, it is a little bit ridiculous when you see a dude and then all of a sudden he's like head engineer of SeaWorld, Florida.
Yep. And one of the things that I feel about this film is like, one of the big things about it, of course, was that it was 3D, and that's when like 3D was like revolutionized, like, at the time. And now it looks really hokey, but at the time that was like pretty revolutionary. But it feels like rather than make 3D and adapt it to the film, it feels like they made the film specifically for the 3D purpose. And I'm sure that's exactly what they did. But I mean, you totally feel that. So you have this premise of, a shark getting into SeaWorld, which, could have been pretty cool. But, they just took it and made it into a really pitiful film with a very weak story and weak characters, I'd like to say, because I don't find any of these characters to be charismatic in any way, shape, or form, like in the first couple of films. At least, you had that. But in this film, there's like nothing like that at all. One of the things that really stands out to me is there's a part when Sean comes to visit SeaWorld, comes to visit Mike and stuff, and he's the one that has the PTSD. He doesn't want to go in the water or anything, but so that bothers me. But the other thing that bothers me is that you hear Mike tell, what's his girlfriend's name, Beth or something. He tells her that.
Oh, I think Beth was the actor's name. The character's name is Kay.
Kay. Okay. One of the things he says is like, yeah, I mean, he doesn't go in the water. You remember that I told you about that shark attack? Like when we were kids, it's like really that you'd want to, that's pretty simply put for, a guy that's now working at SeaWorld and, dealt with this growing up. He's just going to call it a shark attack. He's not going to talk about how it impacted his family, how it impacted him, his dad, and, the city he lived in and all of that. He kind of just brushes it off as a shark attack, almost as if he's like ignoring Jaws 2 ever happened. So, I mean, that when I watched Jaws 3, I mean, that really jumps out at me. Like, what the heck's wrong with you, Mike?
Yeah, it's really weird how they chose to put that in the screenplay because Sean saw Marge getting killed right before his eyes, which would have messed that kid up so bad. It would have messed me up. So they kind of include Jaws 2 by including Sean being petrified because Sean wasn't in the water in Jaws. It was Mike that the shark went by him, even though Sean was crying. Mm-hmm. But obviously, a first-hand experience of Marge getting killed right in front of him in Jaws 2 would do that. I'm not going in the water. So they only say that one time, I think like when Mike says it to Kay, but like so he ignores Jaws 2, but he doesn't. So it's really weird. But I think the funniest, I have a joke here. The funniest or the weirdest thing about when Sean comes in and they start talking is Sean kisses Kay right on the lips. I'm like,
He does.
What is this some kind of 70s thing? Like, shit, give me a brother that can kiss his girlfriend on the lips every time I see her. What the hell? That is but the 3D thing. I want to talk about the 3D thing. Universal was cool enough to include the 3D version on the Blu-ray disc they released like last year or 2 years ago. I think it was last year. So I did, fortunately, I don't have a 3D TV, but my buddy has it. We got to watch like the opening credits, and I'm not gonna lie, the 3D did look really, really good. Like it looked really good. Like the sunset of the steroided dude, who gets killed at the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
He's, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, the mustache man. Like that sunset looked like really good. Like it looked pretty excellent. So the movie looks like utter crap in 2D. Like you'll notice on some shots, like the edges are all fuzzy and stuff, and like obviously the special effects look like utter garbage with the shark not even moving. But we didn't get to watch that. But I assume in 3D it looks pretty sick. But in 2D, it's like the worst thing you've ever seen in your life. So that's why you have so many like those gimmick shots that look so dumb when you watch it regular version. Like, you got like the tentacles from like an octopus or whatever coming at your face in like the underground kingdom before the shark attacks, and like you got like like the heads coming at your face and all that stuff. All that looks so dumb in 2D, but the gimmickiness, I'm assuming in 3D looks pretty freaking amazing. So
yeah,
but yeah, it was pretty much like you said. It was just made for the 3D. Like this was what, 76? Or what did you say it was?
No, 83. I think.
Or 83. My bad. I was thinking of like Jaws 2, ages, because Jaws 1 was 75. This is like before like real big 3D films started coming out, so it's probably like in its beginning baby stages.
Right.
So they probably also pumped a crap ton into the 3D cameras rather than like really good effects. Like there's this one shot that's so bad that they didn't even fix up. That was a green screen of that submarine. I'm pretty sure you've noticed it. And it's the submarine goes from like to the front to the side, and then when it does this in the wide shot on the side, they forgot to like clean up the keying of the green screen, and then you can see like just like the bottom half of the submarine boat just like dissolve into the water. Just like oh wow.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like they were like, oh, what can we do in 3D that would be really cool? Oh, let's do a Jaws movie. It's like, I don't think they really cared about, the quality of the overall film. It was just kind of like, let's do something in 3D, let's make a quick buck and call it a day. And I mean, that's exactly what the film feels like. It's just really hard for me to get through this movie. And I mean, you talk about like Mike Brody's evolution. Instead of like evolving as somebody that was affected by these events as a kid, and they had some greater effect on what he did as an adult. Even after he knows that the shark's there, what does he do when the little shark is in the pond, and it's like drowning or whatever, because they move it to that little pond or whatever they put it in, the little tank.
Yeah,
it's like he jumps in with it. No big deal.
Yes,
he's touching it. Like, he doesn't even have any expression on his face like, oh, do I want to do this? Nope, he's totally comfortable. And then when he has to go under the water and, he's welding on the undersea kingdom or whatever, it's like, he doesn't even, it's like, no big deal. I know there's a shark over here somewhere, but, I'll go take care of it.
Yeah, it's so dumb. Like him and Kay's, now that you said that, him and Kay's relationship, I did not care for them at all. I didn't care for Beth. I think her name is Bess or Beth Armstrong. I think it's Bess Armstrong. Yeah, it's Bess. She was just like over the top. The British guy. Oh my God, their exchange when they first meet in like the dolphin like auditorium or whatever. The British guy was like, oh no. So it starts off with her saying, hey, why did you ram that whaler? And then the guy's like, he got to my way, ruined my perfect shot. And then she goes, yeah, I was impressed. I'm just like, why? What is going on with the? You said that the films were like almost like a quick cash grab type deal. And I feel the same exact way with like pretty much all these sequels. They felt like they needed to get into this window and they needed to make as much money as possible. And they didn't care really much about making a great film because it shows with the subpar story of the first film, the terrible technical issues and story of Jaws 3, and then the pure craziness of Jaws 4. Instead of like really taking their time and making a great film like, say, Force Awakens or, something like that, rather than rushing it just because the technology is there, say like the prequels. There's so many like stupid things in Jaws 3. It kind of blows my mind. Even though I do want to say, you talked about the 3D effect. Watching the films backwards, there's one really cool shot that I guess the production designer of the first 2 Jaws films directed this film. And I guess he did some second unit stuff for Jaws 2, Joe Alves. One really cool shot, I think, at the very first attack, or the dude with the mustache getting killed. It's like a shot of inside the shark's mouth, and you see like it all bloodied and stuff and chomping. That was really cool. I will admit that. So there's some good stuff in here. And you said way at the beginning of when we were talking about Jaws 3, you didn't like any of the characters. None of them had charisma. I will say there's only one character I really, really loved was the owner. Louis Gossett Jr., I think his name is, the actor's name. He was so awesome. From the start, I knew I liked him. Like, I actually, when Vine was still a thing, I made a Vine of, I forget what it was, I titled the Vine, but I was like, Black people keep it real. And like, it was Kay going, the shark was caught inside the park. Its mother is inside the park. And then it cut to Lois Gossett. I ain't talking about no damn shark's mother. And so like, you can only do 6 seconds of a Vine. So it worked out really well. So like, the reason why I like him and his character so much is he has sass. Not only that he has sass, but he is this evil owner trope, and he arcs because he's like in charge or overlooking like the 2 sequences where they try to catch or kill the shark. I think it's the baby in the first one. The second one was the welding. And so like the first one, he's all like on the comm, like making sure everybody's okay. It's subtle. So he's like in charge and making sure like he's responsible for everything. And then he'll make bad decisions, but he's a human being. So like it's a good fleshing out of his character. So like he made a bad decision of bringing the baby shark and putting it on exhibit, even though it shouldn't have been. And obviously the shark dies because of it. And then the second sequence what I was talking about was I think when they're fixing the welding, and he does something where like, or oh my god, before that I have to remember this one great line. He says something about like, I don't think so, nephew. Because the one guy, I don't know if that's really his nephew, right, or he's just saying it because it's another black guy. It was so great. But that sequence when he said nephew, he's like, I think he was talking about, oh, no. Okay, it was for when the underground or the underwater kingdom went down and the doors went up and people were trapped. And he made that announcement over the PA. He's like, or right before that, he goes, I would like everybody, we have a few technical difficulties, and I would like my people down there to go to your local tourist person in charge and go to the nearest exit conveniently and quietly. Thank you. And then he goes, is this thing off? And they go, yeah, it's off. Want some lights down there? I'm just like, he actually like cares about the people because he understands he messed up and now he has to. It's almost like a Masrani type deal, but not as not. Honestly, I would say this is better than Masrani because it's a little more clear and there's more charisma there. So he understands and he saves that one. I think he saves the white girl when the shark goes through the glass at the end, but poor nephew gets eaten. I'm like, damn. But at least he saves one person. So like he has, in my opinion, the most fleshing out, and he's the best character, which is messed up because he's like a middle character. Like we should be rooting on Kay and Michael, but I don't give a crap about Kay and Michael. I'm rooting on Louis Gossett. That's not good storytelling.
Sure. And honestly, I wasn't a fan of the Calvin character either. Like like every time I see him, it's like, oh, screw this guy. Like,
oh, see, I forgot his name. Now you mentioned it, I have to say his name. Calvin Bouchard.
I couldn't stand the guy either. It's like nobody in this film could I like really stand. I mean, I know that. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like he definitely was fleshed out a little bit more. I mean, you know what his motivations are. You know, he's just after like basically like making sure that the park's running and he's making money, this and that. But I mean, you know, it's pretty clear early on that he's not necessarily a really good dude. But yeah, I mean, he does have these little things that he does here and there that you know, kind of make him a little more enjoyable. But I mean, very mildly so. I mean, I guess when you're dealing with Jaws 3, it's like that's not really a tall order.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned that I did like, and I actually did have this on my notes as well, is that when there is that shot of the Australian dude, what's his name, Philip or whatever his name was, when his body is like inside the shark, and it's like they kind of show you like what that looks like from inside the shark, which is totally unrealistic because that's just not the way it works. But
it kept on chomping and chomping.
Yeah, but it is a really cool shot because we don't see that in any of the other Jaws films. We never get that perspective, so that is really cool to see.
Here's something I want to say that you just said that I have in my notes as well towards the end, is that's the dumbest thing I've heard in my life, that this guy, he's eaten, but he's not eaten because he's like still there, and like he still has conveniently his hand out with a grenade, and then they go get like the little hook, and then they blow up the shark. I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me right now. Like sharks, they go out, they tear through their prey like, you know, crocs do. They rip and shred and then they eat it. And then, but you know, you're telling me this guy is all, you know, still conveniently in the shark's mouth with the grenade there with the pin not pulled yet. It's just like, oh, come on. So I mean, I can see why you think this one's worse than Revenge.
Yeah, it's dumb. It's just flat out dumb. Yeah, the guy, I mean, you shouldn't even have that perspective because, you know, obviously the shark has a throat, it's got a stomach and all that. You're not going to just see, like, its food just sitting in its body. But it is a cool shot because, like I said, we don't see that in any of the other films. So it is pretty interesting the way that they did it. But, yeah, even when that guy gets eaten, like, before this happens, like, just the way he gets eaten is, like, little by little. And you see blood. It's like, well, how come he's not torn up when they show him, like, inside the shark's stomach? So, just strange.
Yeah. Speaking of dumb, like, I still don't get that stupid hand game that they played. Like, what the hell is that? Like, of course, the person who, like, either, like, lets go or just, like, is a stronger person who works out or whatever is going to win. It's just like that. Every time I watch that movie, I'm just like, this is the stupidest thing I've seen in my life. And, like, oh, he won. Let me buy you a drink. Like, oh, God.
Yeah, it is pretty silly. Like, it's kind of hard to watch that because...
It is.
And it makes, and like, oh yeah, and then what does Mike say? He says something like, oh yeah, Sean's like the king of whatever that game's called. It's like,
oh
okay.
My God, yeah.
Terrible. So yeah, I can't get away from Jaws 3 soon enough, so let's talk about Jaws 4 a little bit. So Jaws 4. Okay, so, you know, not a huge improvement in my opinion over Jaws 3, but at least I kind of feel like it's a little bit more in the continuity of the Jaws series. Like, Jaws 3 is the one that I can kind of say, you know, I can kind of pretend that it never happened. You know, I can kind of just put that in the back of my pocket and just ignore it completely. But Jaws 4 does, to me, kind of have a little bit more of that continuity because you have Lauren Gary who's back, and you have, you know, a few cameos here and there, and it's on Amity Island, at least for part of the time, even though the story is just as ridiculous as Jaws 3, at least it does have a little bit of that familiarity to it. What do you think?
No, I agree. By having her return, and of course you go back to Amity, you have, you know, a picture of Brody, and then you have Sean kind of taking over his job. So there is a familiarity there, and I can agree with you for that. A lot of dumb things happen in this film too, but at least you have like some kind of like mise-en-scene where it reminds you of Jaws. The mise-en-scene is like everything in the film, like the costumes, the location, the cinematography, all that, the actors. So like having returning actors totally helps. And I would say I forget the actor's name that played Michael, but he did a better job probably of Dennis Quaid. Probably because Dennis Quaid didn't have nothing to work with. But it felt that maybe also. The you know, Jaws 3, now that I think about it, doing a quick analysis, there was like, you know, trying to like a family building aspect and also trying to include Sean and having that family atmosphere. But Jaws Revenge has more of a family atmosphere because you have Michael with his new family. You still have the family back home at Amity. What's left of them, Sean gets killed. So, like, Ellen comes over. And then, of course, you have the excellent Michael Caine in the film, who doesn't have much to work with, but what he does work with, it's pretty cool. He does a great job for me, at least. I think he's awesome.
Yeah. That's definitely one of the cooler things about it. I mean, I like Michael Caine in anything he's in, really. Like, I mean, he kind of, like, he elevates this film a little bit more. He gives it a little bit more credibility, which, again, isn't hard to do because it's Jaws the Revenge. But it is cool to have that aspect. But, yeah, I like that they go back to Amity for the beginning of the film. And, you do have those connections. One thing that's interesting is at the police station where, all of a sudden now, Sean's a cop. And, like we were saying earlier, Mike is doing something completely different from being an engineer. Now he's like a marine biologist or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you do have that portrait of Brody, which I thought was really cool. But what kind of stands out to me is, like, Polly seems like she's younger than she was in the original Jaws. Have you noticed that?
No, I did not.
So,
probably because I watched it backwards. It seemed normal then.
So I have this theory, like, that maybe it's not really the same Polly. Maybe it's just kind of like an office thing. Like, whoever is in that position of being the secretary of the police station, maybe they just call her Polly, like, out of habit.
Maybe, yeah. It's just a nickname they've had for years. It's
yeah.
Like Amity tradition.
Yeah. Hey, Polly. Well, I'm not Polly. I'm Emily. It's just like, oh, you're Polly now. Something like that. But, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the first film how Mrs. Taft is makes a cameo at the beginning of Jaws of Revenge. Did you also notice that Mrs. Kintner was there too?
I didn't notice it, but I did see the IMDb Mrs. Kintner. I was like, I guess she was there too for some reason. I guess she's a supporting member. She slapped the crap out of her husband. And I thought they weren't on good terms, but I guess they are on good terms. So I did like that I see Mrs. Taft there.
Yeah, that was cool. And I guess, because Mrs. Kintner, she lost her son to a shark, and now, the Brodies lost somebody to a shark. So I guess, she's like, oh, well, I guess we're not that different after all or something. Or I don't know. Maybe they made amends, like, after the first film. Who knows? That's never explored.
See, now that you said that, that's another missed opportunity for them to have, like, just one little moment. It would have took them 20 seconds. For them to just, like, look at each other, cry, and then hug, and that'd be it. Like, you don't even have to say anything. All you have to do is have that. Like, that would be, that's, like I said, missed the boat with all these sequels.
Yeah, totally. Like, instead of having that, really drawn out party that they were at, celebrating, what's his name's, remember it was, like, the wife's birthday or something, of Mario Van Peebles? Like, instead of, like, having that long, drawn out scene of them at that party, why didn't they, just give, like, 20 seconds of, some of these other characters in Amity talking a little bit, or just kind of, fleshing out and, hearkening back to the original film. I think that could have tied it more closely to the original film if they would have done that. But, just things like that they just totally could have fleshed out a little bit more. And there was somebody else in the house. I don't know who it was. Like, I can't really make it out from the credits. Like, initially I thought maybe it was the mayor, but it's not the mayor because it's a totally different actor. But there's somebody else in the house there at the beginning, and I hope I can figure out who it is. But yeah, there's somebody else there too. But what's funny is, like, looking at these pictures now, is that it feels like this film, like, at least age-wise, like, going by the ages of the characters, it feels like more in line with what the characters should be at in 1987 versus 1983, where they're suddenly a lot older. I mean, this feels like a little bit more organic. Like, this should be the right age for Michael and the right age for Sean.
Right.
So, yeah, one of those little details that, obviously weren't that important when they were doing Jaws 3, but at least, for Jaws 4, it seems like something they kind of went back and addressed to some extent.
Yeah.
This is totally off topic, but Ms. Kintner, I had a 4th grade teacher that I always felt looked exactly like her.
That is amazing. Oh my God.
I never told her that, but what if I had? It would have been interesting.
I wonder if she would have known what you're talking about.
Probably not.
I think there's either 2 ways. One, I've noticed this in life. One, they've never heard of that before. Or 2, I hear that all the time. And they get depressed about it.
Yeah, that's true. There's seldom like a middle ground. Like, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Like, yeah, you don't usually hear that answer. Looking at the house in Jaws 4, I kind of felt like from Jaws 1 to Jaws 2, like the house kind of felt like it was probably the same house. In Jaws 4, do you feel like maybe it's a different house?
Yeah, or they moved because I'm looking at that screen cap of her. I'm assuming that's her house and not like someone else's house that they're at. I felt like their house was farther back from the ocean, and I don't know. I felt like also because they had like when the opening scene of Jaws when he took his truck Brody and went everywhere. It seemed like they were like isolated from other people. They had kind of had their own little spot, Rather than in Jaws 4, it looks like they're on like a little bay area with a bunch of other look like beach houses or whatever. So
Right.
I don't know if that's I don't know if it's the same. I mean, it's a good looking house. That's probably one of my favorite looking scenes because they got the sunset and then Michael goes running on the beach and stuff. That's like one of my favorite looking scenes in the whole film because it looks beautiful. But I don't know if that is the same house or not. It might be, but I don't. If I had to say yes or no, I'd say no.
Yeah, for sure. So other things about Jaws 4, it's just like you mentioned briefly earlier how the whole thing is about it being more of like a personal story revolving specifically around the Brodies, how the sharks are like almost in a paranormal sort of fashion. They're like specifically trying to kill them, and just that whole thing of the shark being over at Martha's Vineyard, Amity is following them all the way down to the Bahamas, which is like, I don't know, a couple thousand miles or something, maybe at least. It's just that aspect of the film that makes it. I mean, maybe if they would have had a different shark out there, like like a warm water shark or something, that would have been a little bit more believable. But it's like, come on, this shark knows that they took a plane to the Bahamas and it's going to follow them over there by swimming, and it's going to get there at the same time they do. It's like, seriously.
Yeah, that's the most ridiculous thing. I forget how many miles it is from like New England to. I have it written somewhere. It's like I think it's like 3,000 or something miles from New England to. I mean, sharks can swim, great distances like orcas and stuff. But it's just like, yeah, it's the most. The biggest problem with this film. It's quite implausible. There's like no rational thought when they were like really making the movie. And I mean, obviously now I think the director. I watched the interview. It's like 10 minutes long. It's on YouTube. I forget the director's name. But he totally owned up and fessed that they made mistakes and it wasn't a good idea. So, like I said, I think they waited too late to take risks. They should have took risks with the mafia thing, a little bit more subtle. The second screenplay for Jaws 2, and for Jaws 3, they should have had some more character depth. And then for this film, they shouldn't have had it at all. Maybe they should have just had her vacationing in the Bahamas. Rather than having this ridiculous like telepathic thing she has with this shark, and then there's this the revenge of needing to get revenge against my cousin's being killed, so I have to kill your son, and then then I have to kill you. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I mean, I almost kind of feel like, whose revenge is it? Is it the shark's revenge, or is it Ellen's revenge for, like running into the shark or whatever happens at the end? But it's not really clear cut either way. I mean, it feels more like it's the shark, like, I'm gonna kill the rest of this family, one at a time.
Yeah.
It's just really stupid. But we already know that, but we're here to talk about the specific things that we've noticed about it. So another thing that I've noticed with the revenge is that even though this is over a decade over the original film, like the shark doesn't look all that much better. Like when they show the animatronic shark in the water, like it barely like moves its like upper lip up and down, and it's not really even like moving its tail back and forth. It's just kind of like gliding through the water, which is so dumb.
Yeah, I don't know what the heck they were thinking when they were operating it, because it kind of like glides, and then I didn't notice that it was really gliding, so that's really a great adjective to use. But the thing I noticed that just annoyed the crap out of me was it would tilt like from one 45-degree angle to the other, and it's just like that's not how they swim. They swim straight and then they move. Like as crappy as the animatronic shark from Jaws, the mother, looked when it was just like swimming, and it's almost like they weren't moving the camera at all. They just like had a shot of it with the tail moving back and forth, but at least the tail moved back and forth and it was swimming correctly. And some Jaws 3 review had it pretty wonderfully that it was actually scientific, that, and it's not featured in any other Jaws film, that they actually had like the lips of the shark move when it chomped in Jaws 3. And Jaws 4 obviously was like Jaws 2 in one word. It was all stationary. But the animatronic shark sucked in this film. It looked like crap. I mean, they look like crap in the third film, the special effects too, but you see the shark the most in this movie. As an adult, it does nothing for you because it's not scary, because it looks like garbage. But as a kid, you probably like it a lot. I mean, I remember when I saw Jaws: The Revenge DVD at Target when I was like 12 or 13, and I bought it, and I really liked the movie because I got to see more of the shark, and maybe I got to see more of the action, even though we can get into it now if you want to. The sequence, I loved it as a kid, and as a teenager, when the shark follows Michael into like the little boat or what the down submarine.
Oh,
I loved it so much. Yeah, I loved it so much as a kid, and then now when I watch it and I see this big ass shark go in these little ass, and it's like the shark's not even moving its tail or anything. It's just like the most ridiculous thing ever. That's the biggest adjective, or the most accurate adjective I could say that describes this film is just ridiculous. It's just like, how does that big ass shark fit in that boat, and then it doesn't even swim? It just glides, like you said.
Yeah, and that's another thing about setting this in the Caribbean, is that the water's a lot more clear. Of course, you're going to see more of the shark, like the lighting's going to favor like all those imperfections and how ridiculous
That's true.
the animatronic shark looks. So it's like, come on, guys. I mean, if they needed to take it somewhere else, why not take it to like, I don't know, California, Australia, somewhere where the water's a little bit more believable. It's a little more similar to what you have or would have in Amity. It's like they take it to the Caribbean. You see, first of all, there's no great whites in the Caribbean because the water's too warm. They don't like that. But it doesn't matter. I mean, logic totally goes out the window when it comes to Jaws: The Revenge. So anything goes.
Yeah, they're usually in, I think South Africa. You see them somewhere in the Atlantic, and totally in California, either SoCal, or you see them in North Cal, mostly in Hawaii, or Australia too. They're all so like those are your hotbeds for great whites. Like that's a great idea. I mean, I like the Caribbean. God bless them right now with the hurricanes.
Sure.
So it's a really great choice to have, and it's a great choice to have a shoot a movie and have something that's different. And I think that's what they're going for. But like you said, it's a great analysis. The waters are too gorgeous, so you can see how bad the shark really looks. Michael, it's a great white.
Oh gosh, yeah, like he was kind of. I mean, I like Mario Van Peebles, but in this film, he just kind of annoys me.
I do too, and I don't know. I liked him in the film as a kid. I like him now, but I felt like I don't know if you want to talk about the two endings already, but I felt like the dude needed to die because he put Michael was not responsible as it is, but Michael agreed to it. But he was the biggest contributor to the idea that we should not kill the shark, because the whole plot is that they were not going to call in the Coast Guard or whatever to kill the shark, because that's what Michael said to do. And then Jake was like, "No, we have to study it." And then Michael's like, "Okay." Yeah. And the whole reason why they did that was because I guess it was a Jurassic Park 3 type deal. I have to burp. Where Alan Grant had to take the Kirby's check because he was running low on funds, and I guess their grants were running low on funds just like JP3, so they had to study the shark somehow because their crabs or whatever they were getting from the ocean floor was not putting bread on the table. So kind of a cheap way, but it works.
Sure.
But I felt like, as much as I did like Jake, and but because of that, I felt like he needed to die, and especially after what happened to him in an ending. It's just like, how does he survive that in the theatrical cut? That blows my freaking mind. That's the first time ever, I think, in all the Jaws films that somebody gets eaten and they survive.
Right. Yeah, it's stupid because, I mean, you clearly see that the shark's got him in his mouth. It's chomping or whatever, and, all the blood and stuff. It's like, how in the hell does this guy survive? And not only that, when he survives, he's like cracking jokes. And, it's like, what the hell?
Oh, my God. Yeah, I'm really glad. I'll just get into it really quickly. Netflix has the correct ending, and it blew my freaking mind when I watched it because I'm always used to the terrible theatrical cut ending. So if you don't know, The theatrical cut is Ellen spears. Okay, so actually, hold on. Before this, when Jake, it's all like slow motion and you don't hear anything besides bloop, 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 bloop. Jake spears the shark, and then Jake gets eaten by the shark. There's an extra shot of Jake in the shark's mouth, like stabbing it or something. But I remember just the shark had Jake in its mouth, and Jake was still somehow alive. That's an extra shot that's included in the theatrical that's not in the alternate. So in the theatrical, Ellen Brody rams the little spear or whatever at the end of the front of the boat into the shark, and the shark explodes. Not only does it explode, but it dies in the exact same way, and they reuse the shot of the original Jaws, where you have half the shark floating down. It's the dumbest ending I've seen in my life. So it recaps just a stupid movie. That's why I hate it so much. However, Netflix right now has all the Jaws films, and including Jaws of Revenge with the better alternate ending that was seen in like BBC or something. It's on YouTube, but it's also on the Blu-ray as an alternate ending, so you can watch it. But if you go on Netflix right now, it's all intercut into the correct cut of Jaws of Revenge. And it is Ellen spears the shark, and the shark gets speared, it bleeds, there's blood everywhere, and it dies. And then it floats down, and then you can hear just bloop, 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 bloop. It's really great. And it's just a shot, a wide of the shark and the first like staff or whatever the front of the boat's called, and the spear through it. And it's all wide, and that bloop, 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 bloop. And then it cuts, it dissolves to black. And then it cuts, we don't see Jake alive, Jake's dead. And then it cuts to them on the plane, and I'm like, oh my God, this is new. I haven't seen this before. This makes the movie so much better. A guy who gets eaten by a shark is actually eaten, and he deserved to die because he put, Mike's kids in danger, even though Mike was responsible too. But still, his greediness, it shows that greed is bad, kids. So he dies. Correct ending, not exploding, doesn't look ridiculous. I loved it. It almost boosts up the score like 2 points for me. It's just like, why was this not made as a decision? This should have been the decision from day one, rather than like Ellen, oh Michael, I killed the shark, swimming over, like, oh, and then Jake, I'm okay, man, or whatever he says. It's just like, man, that's just some ridiculous, American Hollywood BS, rather than like good filmmaking.
Sure.
Rant over.
Yeah, I mean, no matter how you slice it, whether you use the theatrical ending or the international ending, which I think is the one is that the one that's on Netflix right now? I'm not really sure.
Yes.
Okay, no matter how you slice it, I mean, I don't think either ending obviously is ideal. Especially like the way that you said it, once the shark goes underwater and, drowns or whatever, with half of it, like stabbed. Like, it cuts really abruptly to the last, like, literally, like, 30 seconds of the movie, which is them getting on the plane and, seemingly, like, nothing happened. Oh, yeah, come visit me and this and that. It's kind of ridiculous either way. But, yeah, most certainly, having him survive after, being chomped by the shark and, not just one explosion, but 3 explosions where you see the shark explode 3 times. And I think I showed this to you the other day, but if you take like a snapshot, you can actually see that it's just a stupid little like rubber toy that they're exploding, like from 3 different angles. They had to have shown like the international cut to like some idiot test audiences, and they're like, oh, I want to see the shark explode. And then they did it. They shot like, they must have done a reshoot of like a little toy shark, or it looked like clay they made it from or something, and they just exploded it really quickly. And they did like they shot with 3 different cameras, and they used all 3 differently. It looks terrible. One thing I do want to rebut about your criticism about them just like going from the water, which I think people have said about in the past, like them killing the shark and then all of a sudden they're back on the plane. Hoagie, I think that's what his name was, Michael Caine. Hoagie, before he landed the plane, he called in like the Coast Guard or whatever and said like, I'm at this location and I need you to send some boats and some planes for a rescue. So I buy that, they went from one place to the other because he called it in. So,
But I mean, I understand, like, yeah, everything's all happy. But then again, that's American cinema. Everything has to be happy, and when you leave the theater, because that's what
Sure.
it's all about, happy endings. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you that both endings aren't ideal, but pick one you have to work with. I'm picking the international cut.
Sure.
Yeah, it sucks. It's like, what do you want to eat today? You want Ritz crackers or do you want club crackers? It's just like what choice do you
Yeah,
have?
and it really feels like in the version where the shark explodes and Jake survives that. I mean, you could totally tell that they went back and like filmed this later on because at least here at Universal in Hollywood they have this. It's like an artificial, like it's a reservoir that they sometimes film like water scenes in. Like some of the Pirates of the Caribbean films have been done there. Other films too, and they have this really big like blue screen wall, but they can paint stuff on it like clouds and things like that. I mean, you
Yeah.
can totally see that in that version of the film because I mean, you see them in the water, but you can totally see that there's a wall behind them that just has the stuff painted on. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, see, I didn't notice that at all, but what I did was I actually watched, there's like a behind the scenes featurette that's like, I think 20 minutes long, but they showed that off because to double as the Caribbean, it was probably for the reshoots, I don't know, but to double as the Caribbean, they went back to Universal and they had that place where you said the big ass pools. I think they had two of them. They had like one, I think maybe indoors, and one that was outdoors that was like really big. And I think that's when they had the wall, and then they showed off like they repainted the wall to be like the sky of the Caribbean. And I didn't notice that. Now that I know that, I'll probably notice it. But they also took like dyes to make the water look like the Caribbean teal or whatever, green.
Hilarious. I haven't seen that. Is that if that's in the Blu-ray, then I'll need to go back and watch that because I haven't, or it's probably on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. I think the only special feature on the Blu-ray, I actually have it right here in front of me. I think the only special on the feature on the Blu-ray is that the alternate ending, thank God, is in HD and it's included. I don't think anything else is really, it might be on the Blu-ray, but it's definitely on YouTube. So you can go on YouTube right now and watch. It's in two different parts, I think, or one part. It's uploaded twice, but it's a decent watch.
Right on. Yeah. Speaking of Universal, as you know, I was in Japan recently, and I went to Universal Studios Japan, and they have a pretty nicely done like Jaws like themed area. Like I haven't really posted or shared too many photos of it, but it's pretty nice. They have like recreations of some of like the areas like you see in the films, and I know that all the Universal parks have a little bit of this, but it seemed a little bit more expanded to me. It was almost like a mini like Jaws land type thing. Like they have like a little house. It has a mailbox. It has like Ellen Brody on it, and just little touches that kind of tie back to the films and stuff like that. I'll need to send you some photos to check it out. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
pretty cool stuff. Just little details and stuff like that. But yeah. So we've covered Jaws, Jaws 2, Jaws 3, Jaws the Revenge. Here we are. What is it? 30 years apart from the last Jaws film, Jaws the Revenge. Why do you think we haven't seen a sequel in this long amount of time, 30 years?
That's a really great question. I don't know if I have a really specific answer for you, but it doesn't help that each film gets progressively worse, and 4 was just like so bad. But I also don't understand that you have like one of the greatest films in cinema history in Jaws, and you don't do any justice by giving it a great sequel or a prequel, because people have been asking for like a Quint prequel, which would be freaking awesome. Maybe like a USS Indianapolis, maybe fleshing out of that, because he told a great speech. I guess Robert Shaw wrote that. Maybe something like that, but I don't know, like how many times can you do a shark movie? But people have been making, The Shallows, 47 Meters Down, which was terrible. But The Shallows was all right. But, how many times can you do a shark movie? And then like, what if you do a reboot and AKA a remake? Now people are going to complain because, Jaws is perfect and they don't want to see their favorites ruined like Ghostbusters that people complain about. So it's a tough dilemma. However, I think like I'm with you in the same boat. I love Jaws. I think it's underrated, and they really should be like merching the heck out of it. And it really makes me mad that they took away the Jaws ride to expand Harry Potter World. I'm like, yo, that's like I never got to ride the Jaws ride, so like maybe I'll have to go myself to Japan to see some cool stuff. it sucks, man. It sucks. We should I don't know, maybe somebody will make a sequel. Hell, I'll write a script for a Jaws film. I don't care. We need some kind of like justice to make up for Jaws 4, or at least the ending of the franchise, because it's already happened with Jurassic Park. Jurassic World came back, made a buttload of money, and was good. It came back from a not so great Jurassic Park 3. The prequels were harped on, even though I like episode 3, and they rebounded with Force Awakens. It's very possible, and I don't know why. Maybe because, Jaws doesn't have that, like, a fandom where people come together on these websites they talk about all the time. Even though there's a pretty good fandom, I follow the Daily Jaws, free plug for the Daily Jaws. Great photos, great information and stories.
Oh yeah, me too.
So if you don't follow him or her on Instagram, Twitter, I think Facebook too. Twitter and Instagram are the most popular that he or she posts on. There's a community there, but maybe there's just not a big enough community, a niche for Universal to be like, all right, yeah, because they keep on cranking out the Harry Potter stuff, and now we're getting Jurassic from them, and then Disney with the Star Wars, and superhero films are the craze, and I don't know, it kind of stinks, one of the greatest films of all time doesn't get more, because we see horror films like Saw has a new film coming out called Jigsaw. That's the 8th film coming out in October. Like Harry Potter has I think 8 films too. They had 7 and then they had a prequel, or they had 8 and now they have a prequel. Just there's Star Wars has a crap ton of movies. I don't see why we can't give Jaws some more love.
Yeah, for sure. And in this current Hollywood climate where it's constant reboots, remakes, sequels, it just kind of boggles me a little bit how there isn't anything going on with Jaws. And I mean, I kind of feel like it's just a matter of time. I mean, I think at some point, they're going to finish whatever they're doing now with Harry Potter or, what have you. And, they're going to see, well, we got to scrape the bottom of that barrel. What else can we get back out? Jaws. I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, even if it's not something that me and you would like to see, a prequel with a young Quint or something. I mean, there's so many ways that they could go with Jaws, even though shark films do come and go from time to time. I mean, none of them are that great. I mean, there is potential there to reinvigorate the Jaws brand and put out a film that maybe isn't the best film of all time, maybe isn't as good as the original, but, it's a good film that could maybe kickstart, another trilogy or quadrilogy or what have you, prequels. So I hope that it's just a matter of time. I don't know, maybe Spielberg to some extent is kind of holding all that up. Who knows? But yeah,
maybe.
Have you seen that there is actually a USS Indianapolis film that came out last year? It has Nicolas Cage.
Really?
Yeah, I was going through Netflix the other day and I saw it. I haven't watched the film, but I mean, I was scrolling through and I saw that it was there. So definitely want to go back and watch that. I mean, I'm sure it's nothing that great because I hadn't heard of it before. But
a straight to VOD or DVD Nick Cage movie, that's not a good sign.
No, it's not. But I mean, it could be so great. I mean, if they I mean, there's just so that's the best part of the original Jaws film, even though the whole film is amazing. Quint's speech about how he was on the USS Indianapolis and that whole thing. I mean, the way that he describes it and talks about it, you see it in his expression, in his eyes. I mean, you vividly think of all those details he's telling you. I mean, there's just so much that they could do just from that little bit of dialogue, which isn't something you normally have with films. Even the original Star Wars, it was just very briefly touched upon when Obi-Wan mentions the Clone Wars. I mean, there's nothing else said about it. It's just the Clone Wars, and then they go back and make these movies about the Clone Wars and a whole TV series. So that rarely happens, but he gives us enough background on that scene that I really think if they wanted to, they could certainly go back and do a really good movie that follows that whole sequence of events and makes it quite terrifying and everything. But I guess we'll see.
Japanese submarine slammed 2 torpedoes into our side, Chief. Oh man, that's my favorite. I have a freaking photo, somebody's painting. I printed it off at the library in color, and I framed it, and I have it on my wall in my room. That's my favorite, probably my favorite performance of all time, is because I liked it as a kid and I like it as an adult, and it was just absolutely incredible. And I don't know, I would like to see something I don't know what it'll be. Somebody made a great suggestion if they were to do a Quint. I don't know if it was on Twitter or like a website article. Someone had a photo of Michael Shannon with like holding a gun. He had like his hair dyed blonde or something. And they said that like Michael Shannon, if they were to do like a Quint prequel or USS Indianapolis Quint movie, that Michael Shannon's just crazy enough because he's got that crazy look in his eyes, and I love him. He's such a great actor that he would be perfect for Quint, and I agree. So I don't know, maybe somewhere on another Earth where Hillary Clinton's president, they have a Quint prequel already made. So one day I can visit that Earth and I can watch that. But until then, we got to just sit on our butts and be like, hey, Jaws is great. Hey, everyone else, isn't Jaws great? And then like maybe they finally figure out that Harry Potter is overrated, and they give us. I just hate Harry Potter now because of that. Once I found that out, I'm just like, oh my god, forget you, Harry Potter. Jaws is one of the greatest things in the world, and it's just what's popular, man. You know, man. If Jaws isn't as popular as another franchise, they're not gonna, because they only care about money. Hollywood's a business, and if they're not gonna make their money back, they're not gonna do it. That's why there's so many reboots and remakes and sequels of things, because they're guaranteed. They're gonna get their money back. They're not taking risks. This isn't the 90s anymore, sadly. They're not going to take risks on spec screenplays and make these like independent films with original stories. You still see them, and they're still great, like Wind River. Wind River was mind-blowing, and I suggest everybody see that if you still can, if you haven't already. But Hollywood's shifted into what's big, what's popular. Avengers, Justice League, and then they have to pump it out. We have, like, I think 6 superhero films a year or so, 8 a year now or something like that. It's insane.
Hard to keep up.
And we can't, right. And we can't get a Jaws movie. We get Shark Night 3D. Come on.
It's pretty laughable. It's really unfortunate, but like I said, I mean, I kind of feel like to some extent it kind of just feels like it's just a matter of time before they do something with it. I mean, it's lying there. I mean, it's, even though they did 3 sequels to it, a long time ago, 30 years ago now, since the last one. I mean, that's enough time to, give the franchise a rest, let people forget about it for the most part, and then, reinvigorate it with, something fresh, a new concept that's takes place in the same universe. I mean, it can be done. It's just, if they have the right people, they have the willingness to do it, they're willing to put the money towards it, to doing it right. I mean, they could definitely do something that I think would be pretty good, but, I guess time will tell whether or not that happens.
Yeah, I guess the last bit to add on to that, you said about Spielberg earlier and whether he can or cannot be like the gatekeeper. I think that's why Jurassic World came back, is because Spielberg, I think in 2011, he announced that Jurassic Park 4 was happening. And he's just like, whoa, where'd that come from? So I think, if he creates something like, if he creates Jaws, Close Encounters, countless films he's made, so Jurassic Park's like, he is like the gatekeeper for, so like, I think it's time to reinvigorate Jurassic Park. And then so he did. And what happened? It was amazing. So like, if he says like, you know what, let's do Jaws. Like, yes. So it's kind of up to him. He's doing a bunch of like random films, mostly these like war films that don't include war, like about a horse and Lincoln and BFG. BFG, I guess, unfortunately flopped. I didn't get to see it, but I would really like him to really get on that Jaws horse again.
Yeah, totally. Or that Jaws shark.
That Jaws shark. I was thinking of horse because the war horse.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. I mean, I guess to wrap things up here, the main takeaway, anybody that's listening to this, is that, we love Jaws. I mean, especially that first film. It's one of those, to me anyway, it's one of those few films where I can watch it anytime. I can quote any part of it. If I'm having a bad day, all I have to do is watch the original Jaws, and I mean, I feel so much better. I love that movie, like, through and through. It's one of my favorite films ever. And even though, the sequels are less than ideal, to put it mildly, they're still part of that continuity. We could still go back and analyze and talk about, the positive aspects of them, which, as with Jaws 3 and 4, there's not too many of those, but, we can analyze them. We can talk about the good things. We can talk about the many bad things that, they tend to have. But it all goes back to that original film that's just so amazing and that we love so much, and that, is really the reason we're here talking about this to begin with. It's because we love that film.
Yeah, it's a perfect summer movie. Like July 4th is the perfect day to watch that film. But just like you said, like if you're having a bad day, like me, I'll throw on like Guardians 1, or I'll throw on like a Jaws or something, because it's one of those films where like you can defeat, your enemy, and it feels good for that day to throw on that film. And so many likable characters, well made film, wonderful actors, and we need to have some kind of justice like Jurassic World did to Jurassic Park 3 with Jaws for Jaws: The Revenge. So I really like Spielberg to reinvigorate that franchise, because man, it's like the greatest film of all time. One of the greatest films of all time. And really quickly before I forget, because I'm not gonna remember, my friend who works at Toys R Us, he's a big horror fanatic, and I was like, "What's the scariest film to you?" He's like, "Oh, Jaws. No problem. No, people are scared to go in the ocean. People are still scared to go in the ocean." I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm scared to go in pools." I remember when I was a kid, I used to had like a snorkeling mask and like the tube, and I would like go under like looking for sharks, even though there's no sharks in the pool. Like, it's still like in your head. It's hands down powerful.
Absolutely.
And that would like to see some more from Mr. Spielberg.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I think makes Jaws so great, is that there is a real world component to it. There's the ocean, there's sharks in the ocean. Every now and then you hear on the news, here locally too, great whites spotted, at the beach, or, near the beach. Earlier this year, there was I think there was something where a little bit north of here, there's a beach, and there was like a sighting of like 12 great whites,
Wow.
not too far from these surfers. So it's just one of those things where, we went snorkeling here 2 weeks ago, and I enjoyed it. I love doing it. I love seeing all the different, the sea lions and the fish and what have you, but it's always there in the back of your mind. We know great whites are out here. What if today's the day where I just happen to be doing my thing, looking at, these pretty colorful fish, and, a great white comes and takes a chunk out of my leg,
Yeah, man. And it's all thanks to that one movie.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's part of what makes Jaws great. All right, Matt. Well, do you have anything that you want to add on top of any of that? I think we did a pretty good job of recapping why we have such a strong affinity for this film, and, what our thoughts about the 3 sequels are, and, the future of Jaws. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to add on top of that?
Yeah, we put it plainly. We want a reboot or a sequel that's actually good, because none of the sequels did justice. Give us, like we said, a tight, gripping screenplay like the first film. Give us some good character backstories, progressions, arcs. Give us some actors with some charisma. Take some risks that aren't like telepathic characters. Don't do safe stuff, and you will make a fantastic film, because that's what Jaws wasn't a safe film in any regard. Spielberg got his ass chewed out every day by Universal for being over budget or not on time and stuff. And what happened? It was the greatest film like ever made. So, listen, like once again, like Hasbro, listen to our second last podcast about distribution for Star Wars toys, and Universal. Hey, out there. We did a pretty good job analyzing this for like an hour, 2 hours, or how long this is, about your sequels and why the first one was so great. So we would like to see something that would be really fantastic, and we just told you how they can be. So thank you so much, Vicky, for having me on. It was a great chat.
Absolutely, and thank you, Matt, for going back and rewatching those films and agreeing to come on here and talk about Jaws, because quite honestly, there's just not a whole lot of people that I know that, love this film as much as we do. So it is really awesome that you were able to come on here and we were able to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. Like, we're in the Jurassic Park fandom, and Jurassic Park people are just like, they don't care about anything else. Like, we say something about Star Wars, and everyone's like, what? But you yell shark. But anyway, Yeah, like I have a lot of friends that like Jaws, and obviously they're friends that aren't like just the Jurassic Park game. They like Jurassic Park, they like Star Wars and stuff. So like, I guess you and I like the rare like people that like would really want to talk about, indulge in it. So it's good to have friends like us.
For sure. I mean, it's like that in Star Wars too, because I think we were talking about this the other day. Is that if I talk about Star Wars, I have a lot of people that oh yeah, I love it, this and that. I love that photo you posted. But if it's something about something else, whether it's Jurassic Park or DC or something else, it's like these various fandoms are just very like engulfed in that very specific thing that they like. So it is really cool when people have more of a menagerie of interests in terms of these different films. So that's really cool.
Absolutely.
All right, Matt. So if people want to look you up online, can you tell us a little bit about where they can find you, what you do?
Oh yes. Right now I've been producing a lot of stuff on Facebook. So I did some live streams, did Force Friday, did a written story about Force Friday. Doing a bunch of stuff on there, and then of course I was sharing your podcasts. So like that's my like main goal. But I've just been doing YouTube for the past 3 years. So YouTube's just look up Matt Brando. So Facebook page is just look up Matt Brando. But all the social media like Facebook, Instagram, what's the other one? Twitter. They're all at Michael Man, or just search up Matt Brando. And yeah, we can talk Jaws, because watch. I have an idea. It's kind of funny, just as a joke. I'll just start like reviewing Jaws figures and talking Jaws on my channel. I'll start losing subs from all the Jurassic Park people because they'll start hitting because it's not Jurassic Park.
Yeah, you can never please everybody. That's for sure.
Yeah, but hey, Jaws is awesome, and yeah.
Yeah, Jaws is awesome. All right, my friends. Well, I would like to thank you for tuning in to this 14th episode of the Cantina Chatter Podcast. Once again, I would like to thank Matt Brando for joining us today to discuss all things Jaws. Be sure to subscribe on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. If you're listening to the podcast, you can download it on Podomatic, iTunes. Be sure to leave a 5-star review to help increase our rankings. And as always, until the next episode, thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.